It's hard to ignore that childhood has changed in a lot of ways, and one of the most striking reasons is the role technology is playing in it. From the NPR network and KPBS, this is Screen Time, a podcast featuring conversations about technology and kids in today's digital age. Listen to Screen Time wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome in San Diego, it's Jade Hindman. On today's show, the impact of war is felt around the globe no matter how far away you live from it. We'll talk about the economic impacts in San Diego. Then, kids have questions about current events. We'll hear advice on how to answer them. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. As the Iran war stretches into its second week, concerns grow about and around the impact the conflict will have for the global economy. And much of that attention has been on energy prices, particularly the price of oil and gas. Here in San Diego, the average price of gas is a little over $5.30. That's nearly 60 cents higher than a week ago. Joining me now is Daniel Innemark. He is Chief Economist at the Policy and Innovation Center. Daniel, welcome back to Midday Edition.
Thanks for having me, Jade.
Glad to have you here. So, as an economist, what is the first question you have about the impact the war could have on our global economy?
Well, the first question in my mind about the economic impact of war is about the most valuable asset in our economy or in any economy, which is human life. And I know that might be a surprising answer for someone who's known to talk about dollars and cents, but there's nothing more valuable in our economy than a life. Our entire economy is valuable only to living people.
Mm-hmm.
And so the most precious asset in any economy is human life. And the 7 Americans who have died as a result of the war in Iran, including Robert Marzan, who's from Sacramento. The 175 people were killed in an attack that affected a school, most of which were children. These are devastating impacts. And any discussion of oil prices or whatever has got to follow first an acknowledgement that the most important thing in any economy is life.
Indeed. And that the loss of life is immeasurable.
Yeah.
But I do want to know, Chris, how do you begin to gauge against that, the economic impact of war,
Yeah.
with the loss of life, the destruction of people's homes, businesses, how do you gauge that?
Yeah, it would be one thing if there were a bunch of positive economic outcomes of war to weigh against the tragedy of human loss of life. But the impacts of this war are also very negative from a purely dollar and cents perspective. So Iran produces 5% of the world's oil. Iran is, after being attacked, is now retaliating against Gulf states like Kuwait that produce even more of the world's oil. And it has shut down essentially the Strait of Hormuz, which is the link between the Persian Gulf and the rest of the world. And so as a result, that's about 30% of the world's oil production that is suddenly unavailable. And the result of that is that a month ago, the price of oil was $60 a barrel, and now it's 100. And so you might think, well, okay, so oil's more expensive. Who cares? Well, the entire economy runs on energy. So when the price of energy increases, the price of everything increases. And so there's tremendous knock-on effects.
Can you talk about some of those effects?
Yeah.
What's the domino impact here?
Well, the first thing is that oil in the form of gas that we put into our cars and all that comprises a significant portion of most Americans' budget. And so when energy prices go up, that contributes significantly to inflation. And of course, we're coming off of some years of high inflation where we never fully returned to, although we got very close, we never fully returned to the Federal Reserve's target rate of 2% inflation. That's what we consider a good rate of inflation. It's been a little bit elevated, but economists estimate that if this war were prolonged, we would expect globally inflation to raise by another 2 percentage points. So that would double the rate of inflation over our target, which would be really bad. So that's on one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation is that when gas becomes more expensive, shipping and production become more expensive, and people have less money left over from their inflated expenses. And all of that contributes to decrease in supply of goods at any given price and decrease in demand for goods at any price. And when that happens, we expect the economy to shrink and we expect unemployment to increase. So one way you can think about the economy is that there's this balancing act. It's like, imagine you had a seesaw with a little kid on either side of that seesaw, right? You've got two kids on this seesaw and you want to make sure that they're safe. So you don't want the seesaw to get either side to get too high. And one side of that seesaw is the unemployment rate and the other side is the inflation rate. And if the unemployment rate gets really high, well, that little kiddo is way too high up in the air. And so the Federal Reserve comes along and says, whoa, inflation rate's too high. We're going to bring up interest rates, which will decrease inflation, get that kid back down toward the ground where he's safe. But the cost of bringing down inflation is that you tend to increase unemployment. And so the Fed is constantly trying to manage what they call their dual mandate, which is to keep unemployment low and to keep inflation low. And whichever one of those sides of the seesaw is higher, they're coming in to try to use interest rates to bring that side down at the cost of bringing the other side up, right? So it's this constant balancing act. The problem with increased price of oil is that it drives both inflation and unemployment up. So it's almost like you took the seesaw where you're trying to keep these kids safe and close to the ground, and then you put it on a 10-foot pillar. Okay, now both sides of the seesaw are dangerous, right? So that's a problem. And it's a problem that the Fed can't fix.
Right.
So it becomes a really challenging issue when energy prices go up with a potential for what's called stagflation, which is where you have both high inflation and high unemployment.
What's the breaking point?
I mean, nobody really knows, but I would say the factor of concern is how long this lasts. So, if it was just a couple days or something, then that's one thing. But, we're now into week 2 and, the Secretary of Defense is saying that this is going to be the highest, rate of attacks, yet today. So, we don't see this just disappearing tomorrow. And of course, even if the US were to stop striking and Israel were to stop striking right now, that doesn't mean that Iran is going to stop threatening the Strait of Hormuz or going to stop attacking the other oil producing states. So, the question is, are we in for yet another Middle East quagmire, or is this going to be a quick thing that's over swiftly? And I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that question.
All right. It's something we'll continue to follow. I've been speaking with Daniel Inemark. He is chief economist at the Policy and Innovation Center. Daniel, thank you so much, as always.
Thanks for having me, Jade.
Still to come, kids often have questions about war, politics, and the news. Coming up, we'll hear some advice on how to answer those questions. KPBS Midday Edition is back after the break.
At 10 o'clock, they're happy. How is she dead 2 hours later?
When a San Diego police officer is found dead in her home, who investigates? Follow One of Their Own, a new podcast from KPBS, wherever you listen.
Welcome back to KPBS Midday Edition. I'm Jade Hindman. Keeping up with the news and reality of war in the Middle East and immigration enforcement here at home, it can weigh on anyone's psyche. But for children, consuming all that devastation without guardrails can just be dangerous. Parents are tasked with a balancing act, keeping their kids aware and informed, but happy and hopeful too. So where do you start? Joining me with some advice is Kimberly Macias. She's a licensed professional clinical counselor and with Thrive Therapy Studio. So Kim, welcome to Midday Edition.
Thank you for having me here.
I'm so glad to have you here for this conversation. I mean, you work with patients age 5 all the way to 55. How is the news and overall state of our country affecting your clients? I mean, what are you hearing from them?
Right. So I'm hearing a lot, especially with the parents and my adults. They're doom scrolling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially with parents with kids, a lot of times they're like, there's so much out there. Especially with kids with media at their hands, TikTok, Reddit, all these things are consuming it. So it's really hard for parents to realize, okay, how much do my kids know and what should I be sharing with them? What should we be talking about?
Yeah. Well, what are some common concerns you're hearing from parents about how to navigate the news with their kids?
So a lot of times they're always worried about how, especially with the news today, with everything that's going on, especially in our world across seas, our world here, even here in San Diego, what's being impacted, that they often are scared to share some of these things and don't want to over worry their children. But at the same time, they also don't want to keep their children in the dark.
Right, right. I would also imagine that it's difficult to sort of give context to what's happening as well, like historical context and correcting the record so that there is a true understanding of what's happening. And then not telling them too much, right?
Right, especially because what I always say that we are all born with the emotional capacity that we have as an adult, as young as when we were born with it. So they could feel those emotions, but as our children, they're still growing and learning the vocabulary, what's going on around the world. And oftentimes that is being affected, and parents are worried and concerned about today's and age with their children learning about these things.
Yeah. Well, you're a mom yourself, and you have 2 young kids. How have you struggled with this personally?
Yeah, so I have 2 kids who are 9 and 7, so they are in 8, they're in school, right? So me and my husband, we have been talking to them about a lot of the stuff that's been going on here and there. It wasn't until the shootings in Minnesota that happened earlier this year that we realized, you know what, we really need to sit them down and have a really direct family conversations about what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how did that go for you? I mean, I know I have a 5-year-old, and she'll ask about what she's hearing and seeing, and you can give her an answer, but if it doesn't make sense, she's going to keep asking, and she's going to keep asking. So how did you work with that?
Yeah, so I think it's okay to validate our kids, hey, it may not make sense, right? It doesn't make sense to us. It may not make sense to you. But to really focus and emphasize safety and security as parents with our kids, right? That is our job as adults in their lives, to really emphasize, hey, there may be a lot happening in our world today that we don't have control over, but we will always make sure we have your best interest and safety in mind to keep you kids and to be able to go to school, learn, and being kids and having us worry about those things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, how important is it to sort of reassure your children that they, that you're as a parent, as a guardian, you're looking out for their safety and their best interest? How important is it for them to feel safe, even in knowing so much is going on in the world?
Yeah, and we don't want to lie to our children either, right? Because nothing's certain in this world. Mm-hmm. And I think being able to kind of honor that and own that as well, hey, we may not have control with everything that's going on. And maybe some of this is very scary. I know recently my children, for example, they go to a school that's mostly Latinos there. Mm-hmm. And with ICE and some of their classmates are being affected by that directly, and they're seeing that and they're hearing that in the classroom. And I also hear from even some of my clients and patients that they are also similarly hearing similar things, that it may not impact them directly, but indirectly, right? So while we can't quite tell them hey, this is never going to happen or these fears may not ever come true. Like, our job is to keep you safe and secure during this time.
Yeah. I mean, we have recent reporting by our colleague, Gustavo Solis. It shows that ICE arrest of children in San Diego skyrocketed last year. Tell me about the impact that's having on the psyche of children.
Right. Especially for our children, those are their classmates, right, that are being taken away. It may have been their friends that one day was there, the next day they weren't. And they may be confused and not quite understanding what happened, what is going on. So I do think that while for parents, it does seem daunting to have these conversations with them, it is really important for them to help make meaning of their life and their day-to-day.
Yeah. So when it comes to parents of the younger children, that younger child age group, let's say 12 and under, where should they start when it comes to talking about the news with their kids?
So the first thing I always recommend when we're starting this conversation is really asking them what they know, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's the point of saying, hey, there's a lot that's going on in the news right now, and I kind of want to know what you know about it. Because especially if they're school age and they are in school, they're most likely hearing stuff from their peers, right? And some of it may not be accurate. And some of them may be misinformed or, not truths that's going on. And they may have been building this kind of more bigger thing in their head that's more fearful, right? Mm-hmm. So really being direct with them to, oftentimes what I've seen in my experience, our kids, they hear things and it kind of grew even bigger than what is actually reality. And let's face it, what's happening right now is kind of really big and scary. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to be as big as a lot of these kids are building up in their heads.
Yeah. And of course, kids are known for questions. What are some ways to engage with especially inquisitive kids who demand answers like my child?
Yeah. And again, I think we don't want to gloss over anything or minimize anything, but we want to keep things appropriate with younger kids more broad, helping them, again, gain that vocabulary, understanding what's going on. And still wanting to invite them to the table and letting them ask those questions, right? If we as parents noticing it's starting to maybe spiral or getting more and more into that more fear-mongering that they're asking stuff, to really stop them hey, I'm noticing that you're having a lot of these questions and fears with these things. Could we talk more about what you're feeling? And really go there with them and help validate those feelings.
How can you tell that what they're hearing and learning about is becoming too much for them?
Right. So very common symptoms for children for anxiety, right? It's going to be our stomach area. They maybe feel complaining tummy aches, maybe not eating well, maybe having issues in the restroom, right? Because that's where our fight, flight, freeze is activated, right? So they're feeling really anxious and really building it up. We're noticing it there first.
Right. So how do you deal with that?
So again, we want to try to help really, really emphasize our role as parents. That is our job to help keep you feel safe and secure, and for us to hold on to, anything that you're concerned about and really emphasizing, hey, it is scary, and also we're keeping you safe as possible.
Mm-hmm. One question some parents might have, is it ever okay to sort of gloss over the reality or even tell your child a lie about what's happening? Tell me about that. What are the consequences of that?
Yeah. It is very tempting to lie, especially, again, when what we're seeing and hearing, right? Even for us as adults, we may feel concern and feel fear there, and we don't want to pass that on to our children, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't need to go into detail with our children, but I'm always on the side of trying to be as honest with our kids as possible because, again, most likely, especially if they're in school, they're hearing these things from their peers. And, again, you may think that you're having a private conversation or you're listening to NPR or something, and you didn't realize your kids were there hearing it all along.
Right, and absorbing it, too. You also do a lot of work with neurodivergent kids. How do you suggest approaching conversations about the news with them?
So for them, what I've been seeing in my practice and what I've also been encouraging the family that I work with is being direct with them of how it's impacting themselves directly with some of the other, folks, and even with them to the extent we could talk more broadly about the world and country. But for neurodivergency, for those kiddos, they really need to know how it's impacting them and kind of knowing the step-by-steps of hey, maybe we're going to do a family safety plan in case something ever happens, especially if some of these things does affect them directly.
Mm-hmm. Any other tips?
I do think that, as we are here in San Diego, we are very much a military town and also a border town, right? So I do think if you haven't had the conversation, haven't started doing it, I really do encourage y'all to really do have the conversation with our children, because you'll be surprised with how much it actually is impacting them.
Yeah. As a parent, so much of the behavior we model is picked up by our kids, even if we don't realize it. What's your advice for regulating our own emotions about the news when we're around our kids?
I definitely do. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I know I was guilty of doom scrolling for a bit. And I do know for some of us, we do take that a little bit more. And I want to say that it is okay if we ourselves need to step away for a bit, for us to be able to get that peace for ourselves and be in a better headspace to really hold that space for our children as well.
Yeah. So much helpful advice here. And we're going to have more resources and support on our website at kpbs.org. That includes a list of news sites specifically geared towards kids, like Dogo News and Time for Kids. I've been speaking with Kimberly Macias. She is a licensed professional clinical counselor with Thrive Therapy Studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for having me.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
San Diego County is known for being one of America's most expensive regions. Locals are feeling the squeeze and looking for solutions. KPBS's new series, Price of San Diego, delves into the rising cost of groceries, childcare, car insurance, and even our beloved California burrito. You won't want to miss this ongoing series live now at kpbs.org/Price of San Diego.